Good day. Is it now? My sister-in-law is from China. Andrew and I are sister-in-law. And she told us about a parable that they have in the Chinese community. And there's a man who owns land and he has a lot of horses. And one day, one of his horses runs off and he loses his horse. So all his friends come around to console him and they're like, you lost your horse. That's bad. And he's a wise, thoughtful man. He goes, well, is it now? How do I not know that somehow this might not turn out for good somehow? And a few months later, his horse comes back, and with it comes another beautiful horse. And there's no owner for the other horse, so he gets to keep it. And so his friends all come around to congratulate him, and they're like, your horse came back and you got another horse. That's good. And he's, well, I don't know. Is it now? How do I not know that this might turn around to be unfortunate in some way and maybe be bad? And his son took to this new beautiful horse and started riding it all the time. He would spend hours riding this horse. He loved it. One day he had an accident, fell off the horse and broke his leg. So the man's friends came around to console him and said, your son broke his leg. This is bad. He says, well, wait, hold it. How do I know that somehow this might not turn around and be good in some way? An army came in and attacked the land they lived in, and all the young men had to volunteer and go to war and fight. And all of them ended up getting killed. But this man's son wasn't able to join them in the war because he had a broken leg, and so he was spared the loss of his son. And so our sister-in-law says what happens in the Chinese community, a lot of times someone will share news. Oh, my son got a full ride to Princeton. And they'll be like, there's a man who lost a horse. Be careful, it's a caution. And then if they share sad news, it's like, there's a man who lost a horse. Be encouraged. It might turn around, and it might not always just be a bad thing. And so it's like, where we have the concept of don't count your chickens before they hatch, or every cloud has a silver lining, or you always say no good deed goes unpunished. Sometimes, again, just a way of looking at things. Years ago, when my kids were younger, I homeschooled them. I recall one particular day, and on this day, I had 4 kids at the time. I woke up on time, slept well the night before, felt refreshed, doesn't always happen. Went to make breakfast. When I got in the kitchen, there was no kitchen debt. That's my thing. You know what kitchen debt is? It's always, there's dirty dishes from the day before. The kitchen was ready to start breakfast. The Bible says every day has enough trouble of its own. My version of that at home is every day has enough dishes of its own. I don't want to see today's dirty dishes in there tomorrow. So there was no kitchen debt. We were good. We made breakfast. My kids, they were clean, they were dressed, beds were made, teeth brushed, got the hair brushed, the girls hair braided, everyone was all set to go. My older 2, they always liked to have a competition with the school bus because they were homeschooled. So they would dig in and do their math, and they would try to have all their math done before the bus came to pick up the neighbor kids, and they'd be like, they're not even at school and we're already done with math. And it was one of those days. They did their math, it was all set. My laundry was up to date, doesn't always happen. My house was clean and organized, doesn't always happen. And that day, I just sat back and I was like, this is a good day. There's a man who had ours. It was September 11th, 2001. The 9/11. Minutes after I was thinking that, I was drawn to the television and I was watching the Twin Towers come down. And I was on my knees praying for the nation, praying for our world, praying for my family. And I realized that in that moment, I'm not always the best judge of what's a good day. And it really stuck out to me. We live in a complex world, and sometimes what feels good to us in the short term can be harmful in the long term. There was a man who lost a horse. And sometimes what feels bad in the short term can ultimately be good in the long term. And we live our lives in the eyes of a holy creator, and our lives are in his hand. And whatever might come our way that looks good in the short term or bad in the short term, ultimately, he has an ongoing plan that overarches it all, and that it's his unfolding salvation plan, and that he's with us in the good times and in the bad, But ultimately, he is going to accomplish his purpose in the world, and he's going to unfold it, and his salvation plan will be accomplished, and it will ultimately be the ultimate good. I do have one caveat in what I'm going to talk about today, though, because I'm talking about the good and bad and how can we know. I'm not talking about morality, and I'm not talking about moral choices. I'm talking about events and circumstances, because we can know right and wrong. We can know the difference between moral things. So I want to make it sure that people don't leave thinking I'm talking about moral relativity. It's more about things that happen and the lens we put on them and then how we interpret them. Title of the sermon today you saw was The Good, the Bad, and the Reality. And it's taken from the book of Matthew. And we'll just look at where it is, the yellow arrow there. And so the book of Matthew is structured with an introduction and a conclusion that are in the orange. And we'll get off this slide really fast, we won't do it, but just want to give a quick orientation. The introduction is about how the God of all creation is coming into the world and how he came into the world in human form, in the form of Jesus Christ. And so that's a big event. He's coming into the world. And the conclusion at the other end is how he's leaving the world in bodily form, not leaving it in spirit. He leaves them, telling them he'll be with them always, but he's resurrected and now he's ascending. And so it has those bookends of him, Jesus coming in, Jesus exiting the physical world. And then in between there are 5 sermons that Jesus delivers to his disciples. And one reason there's 5 sermons, Matthew, remember he's a human author, he's writing this book under the inspiration of the Holy Spirit. He's portraying Jesus as a new Moses. And so there's 5 sermons that he delivers, his Pentateuch, just like Moses gave you Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. He's got these 5 sermons. And then there are stories and events leading into and out of the 5 sermons. And we're looking at that one with the yellow arrow. And it's the stories that are leading up to when Jesus is going to weep over Jerusalem and curse Jerusalem. And so the stories are the triumphal entry, what we're celebrating today, Palm Sunday, Jesus' cleansing of the temple, that nobody celebrates ever, and the withering of the fig tree, which is like, huh? Those are the 3 stories. So let's walk through the text together. We'll start with the triumphal entry. Matthew 21, verse 1. And when they had approached Jerusalem and had come to Bethphage, to the Mount of Olives, then Jesus sent 2 disciples, saying to them, "Go into the village opposite you, and immediately you will find a donkey tied there and a colt with her. Untie them and bring them to me." This is bad for someone who owns a donkey and a colt. We can do our own one. There was a Jewish person who lost a donkey, right? And he's probably telling his neighbors, "Someone took my animals." But was it bad? Is it bad, though? If anyone said something to you, you shall say, "The Lord has need of them," and immediately he will send them. The God of all creation, come in human form, is going to ride this donkey into Jerusalem, declaring his kingship. That's good, right? Verse 4, now this took place that what was spoken through the prophet might be fulfilled, saying to the daughter of Zion, "Behold, your king is coming to you, gentle, and mounted on a donkey, even on a colt, the foal of a beast of burden." Matthew does a lot of quoting of the Old Testament. Just in this section today, you'll hear how much. So we're going to rewind about 500 years earlier. This event of Jesus entering on this donkey was prophesied by the prophet Zechariah to the nation of Judah. And what's happening to them at the time of this prophecy is they have been in exile to Babylon for 70 years. And the time is coming that they're going to be returned back to their land. They're still going to be in exile to Persia, but they're going to get back into their land. So after 70 years of exile, they're coming back. They've got a lot of questions. And one of the questions they have is, the promise of a Messiah still good? Because the mistake they make is, we've been punished in exile, this was a bad thing. And they start thinking, are you not good for keeping your promises, God? And he's, oh, like you being in exile wasn't about me keeping my promises. That was about you guys not keeping my commands and not obeying. And so they get told, yes, your Messiah will come. And he's going to come as a servant king. He's going to come in riding on a colt, on a donkey. And that's good. Right? Ever feel like you're waiting a long time for the promises of God to come through? 500 years. They ask the question, is the Messiah coming? He says yes, doesn't tell him when. And 500 years later, he's coming in on the donkey, just like Zechariah had said. In verse 6, we see, and the disciples went and did just as Jesus had directed them, and brought the donkey and the colt, and laid on them their garments on which he sat. And most of the multitude spread their garments in the road. And that's good, right? People are sacrificing. They're getting into this thing. They want to honor Jesus. They want him to come through in this triumphal entry. Others were cutting down branches from the trees, spreading them on the road. That's a good thing, right? The multitude going before him, those who followed after were crying out, saying, Hosanna to the Son of David. Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Hosanna in the highest. And Zechariah did say when this Messiah came, he would bring salvation. And this is what they're crying out, oh, save. They're talking about the salvation that Jesus is going to bring among them. And that's good. And when he entered Jerusalem, all the city was stirred, saying, who is this? And the multitude were saying, this is the prophet Jesus from Nazareth in Galilee. Now that's a good day. Not like my homeschooling, good day. If I were writing history, I would have stopped it right here. This is a high point. Jesus is declared king. I would have been like, let's let him rule. Could you see him in your society? We have a church potluck. You don't even have to bring anything because he's going to feed us all, right? He's healing us. I would have it say, let's just keep this. Let's keep a lifetime as him here and peace in our little corner of the world. And what would have happened? It would have ripped off the whole rest of the world and we all still would have died in our sins and whatever. But to me, this is a high point. This is good. Let's keep it like this. It's a fanfare with a parade even. Oh my goodness, this was a good thing. If you were to interview him after riding in on the donkey and everything and to say, Jesus, what's the first thing you're going to do now that you're king? And this is just silly, but living in Florida, what if he prophetically said, I'm going to Disney World? No, but none of us would have predicted what he does next after this triumphal entry. So just some background. Israel's under Roman rule, so they're still in exile. They're in their land, but they've still been under rule of other nations. And being under Roman rule, this is bad. What the Romans ever do for Israel? And this is a quote from a movie. There is the aqueduct. Safe public roads, sanitation, a unified language that created the right environment for the spread of the gospel. Roman rule over Israel set the stage for a world that God wanted to send his only son into and where it would be possible for that to happen. And so it seemed like a bad thing, but it actually set up what was needed to spread the gospel and to do that. And that's a good thing. So a popular expectation at the time for the nation of Israel was that their Messiah was going to come. He was going to be a king. He was going to emerge on the scene in military power, and he was going to overthrow those stinking Romans. And he was going to judge them for their sin, and he was going to eradicate their paganism, which was bad. And he was going to free righteous Israel, and they were going to take their place where they rightfully belonged. The Messiah was going to come in. He was going to deal with all that was bad, and he was going to bring in all that was good. And that would be good, right? What actually happened, we have up here in Matthew 21, verse 12. And Jesus entered the temple, and this is the temple built by the people back in Zechariah's time, 500 years earlier, cast out all those who were buying and selling in the temple, and overturned the tables of the money changers and the seats of those who were selling doves. Now that can't be good. Doesn't seem very Christ-like, does it? Someone need to get him a WWJD bracelet. We actually had someone tell us one time before that wasn't very Christ-like of him. And then that's one thing we have to do. Do you ever read the Bible and Jesus offends you? Who needs to change, right? Not Jesus. So what's going on? Is Jesus throwing a fit? What's this about? Is it about the donkey? Did he want a better horse to come into Jerusalem on? No. Verse 13, and he said to them, it is written, my house shall be called a house of prayer, but you are making it a robber's den. And that's bad, right? This is a quote from Isaiah 56. It outlines the Gentile mission of Israel in their worship that they've forsaken. They haven't been sharing the gospel with anyone. They were to be light to the nations, and they haven't. They've made themselves just be themselves, and they've centered around their own rituals that they have, and they've lost the meaning of it and the love for God in it and the reaching out to other people and sharing the light that they've gotten from the God of all creation. So the Messiah has come, and he is dealing with sin. He's dealing with the bad. They're bad. They wanted him to deal with the Romans' bad and the Roman sin, but he's dealing with theirs. It's judgment beginning in the house of the Lord. And he's like, you guys aren't doing what you need to do, and I'm coming. And that is good. And in verse 14, the blind and the lame came to him in the temple. He healed them. Healing, that's always good, right? Verse 15, but when the chief priests and the scribes saw the wonderful things that he had done, and the children who were crying out in the temple and saying, Hosanna to the Son of David, they became indignant. That's bad, right? When we get indignant with what Jesus is doing. They're not sharing the sentiment that this stuff going on is good. In verse 16, and he said to them, do you hear what these are saying? And Jesus said to them, yes. Have you never read, out of the mouth of infants and nursing babes, thou hast prepared praise for thyself? And this is a quote, and I'm going to actually read this one. This is a quote from Psalm 8. And it says, O Lord, our Lord, how majestic is your name in all the earth. You have set your glory above the heavens. Out of the mouth of babies and infants you have established strength because of your foes to still the enemy and the avenger. When Jesus makes this quote to them, when they say, do you hear what those little kids are saying? He says to them, I'm not just any king. I'm not Messiah with a small m. I am the God of all creation, come in flesh, who David is praising in Psalm 8. He's declaring himself God. And he's saying, oh, and these children crying out are condemning you as the enemies of God, just like in Psalm 8. He's turning the tables on these scribes and chief priests and saying, who's in the right? The right are the children crying out to me. And you guys, you're missing the boat because you have such strongly held preconceived ideas of what I'm supposed to be like. And you're so enthralled in your own plans. And you want the God of the universe to come and fuel your plans that you're missing his plans that you're to become a part of. Then verse 17, he left them and went out of the city to Bethany and lodged there. So that's the second part. And we move into the third part of the story that's going to, again, lead up to that final sermon of Jesus. Matthew 21, verse 18. Now in the morning when he returned to the city, he became hungry. And seeing a lone fig tree by the road, he came to it and found nothing on it except leaves only. And he said to it, no longer shall there ever be any fruit on you. And at once the fig tree withered. That's bad, right? Is he in a mood? What'd the fig tree do to Jesus? So let's go back, reverse back that 500 years to the people in Zechariah's day. Again, they're coming out of 70 years of exile, which wasn't nice. They're going back into the land. They have questions. And one of the questions they have is, can we stop grieving now? Because for 70 years in exile, we grieve on a regular basis and we fast about it. They're saying, are all our bad days gone now that we're getting back in the land? Is it only good days ahead? Is this going to be good? Should we still fast? Because we grieve, we fast over being in exile. And God's response is, oh, your fasting's never been about me. It's always about you. When you eat and drink, it's about you. If you're going to fast, it needs to be about me, which isn't good, right? If our religious observances are only about ourselves and not about loving God and not about reaching out to other people. They ask that question about Messiah we talked about earlier, and they don't get told when, but they get told, while you're waiting for Messiah to come, concern yourself with being the type of people you need to be who will be ready when he comes. It tells them in Zechariah 7, verses 9 to 10, he tells them how to do that. Dispense true justice and practice kindness and compassion each to his brother. Do not oppress the widow or the orphan, the stranger or the poor, and do not devise evil in your hearts against one another. That's good stuff, right? It sounds a lot like fruit of the Spirit, didn't it? And didn't it sound like the two greatest commandments? Love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. And there's even a ring in there that we get in James later, his assessment about what is pure and undefiled religion, right? Looking after widows and orphans. And so over time, we see this consistent ring, right? God hasn't changed, his expectations haven't changed. And when they come out from the Old Testament in this time period when Jesus is here, and then in the future, as we see the apostles writing, it's the same stuff that's being asked of people over and over again. And so the people of Zechariah's day are being told through that thing that their worship of God and their faith needs to bear fruit. It shouldn't be empty. And in this story, Jesus is coming up to this fig tree, and it's really a living object lesson, or maybe more appropriately, a withering object lesson, that is telling them that the fig tree, when it's all leafy, it gets that way when it has fruit on it. And here's this fig tree, it's all full of leaves, and Jesus is hungry, and he goes over to eat, and there's no fruit on it. Basically, the tree's lying. It's announcing all this fanfare that it has fruit, and it doesn't. And this is Jesus using it as an object lesson and saying, no, that's not the way it's supposed to be. If you don't have the fanfare and have all the leaves, you also need to have the fruit to go with it. And he's comparing it to Israel, and he's saying, you've got all your fanfare, you've got the temple going on, you've got all this stuff, but there's no heart in it. There's no love for God, and you're not reaching the Gentiles. You're not doing anything that you're supposed to do. You're just putting on the show as an end in itself. In Matthew 21, verse 20, it says, and seeing this, the disciples marveled, saying, how did the fig tree wither at once? And Jesus answered and said to them, truly I say to you, if you have faith and do not doubt, you shall not only do what was done to the fig tree, but even if you say to this mountain, and he's talking about the Temple Mount, where the temple is, be taken up and cast into the sea. That sounds bad, right? The temple falling into the sea. It shall happen. In verse 22, and all things you ask in prayer believing, you shall receive. That sounds really good, right? So like the fig tree, what's going to happen in this story is Jesus is going to weep over Jerusalem and curse Jerusalem. And he's standing there with his disciples, and he's saying, everything you've been a part of to this point is going to come crumbling down. It's within about 40 years that the temple itself, so these people running the temple who he cleansed it and drove this stuff out, they cling to that. They're going to hang on to their plan, and they don't want any part of what Jesus is coming and doing. And 40 years later, that temple is destroyed, and there's not one stone left on the other. It's gone. But it's been the whole part of the religious life of his disciples, and he's telling them about it, and he's telling them, this is going to come. It's going to feel like a bad day. It's all coming down, because it's okay, because you have faith in me. And I'm handing the baton to you, and you guys are going to do what hasn't been done in that temple. You're going to go out and do a Gentile mission, and we know historically that's what they did, right? They share the gospel and they bring others in. And he's telling them, and your faith in me, it bears fruit. So you're not going to wither like that fig tree. And instead of withering, I'm going to give you power, and I'm going to give you the power that you're going to go out and you're going to do what the mission of Israel was always to do in this world. And when the temple comes crumbling down and everything looks like it's all at loss, I'm going to be with you, I'm going to empower you, and your prayers are going to be answered by me. And he's contrasting what's happening with them and what's happening with the fig tree, and he's encouraging them. And remember, this is before he dies and is resurrected. He's already planting those seeds in his disciples who are going to go forward and become what Israel failed to become, and gets the cleansing of the temple and gets the example of the withered fig tree happening. We live in a complex world. Sometimes what seems good in the short term might be bad in the long term. We're not always real good judges of that. What seems bad in the short term might actually work out to be good in the long run. And we want to make sure that our short-term focus doesn't just result in a leafy show or in fanfare that doesn't have heart behind it. Reflect on things in your lives that you might think are good and the things you might think are bad, and to really take time and say, Lord, help me to see this through your eyes. Help me to see this in your perspective. And help me to plug into your eternal unfolding salvation plan, so I'm not so caught up in my own plans that I've pushed you out and you're not there, and I'm going to cling on to those even if there's something that is going to take me to destruction, but that I would plug in and connect with what it is you're doing in the world and be able to move forward, because it's a privilege that we get to play a part in his unfolding salvation history and not just our day to day. Like my good day on September 11th, that just was about a clean house and kids doing what they were supposed to be doing. So I just want to encourage that we examine ourselves for how much of our Christianity is that leafy show or fanfare without related fruit. And just again, see Jesus as that king, that triumphal entering king in our life, and have him deal with our sin before we're concerned with whose else's sin he's dealing with, to make sure that we can be fruitful followers who please him.
If you like what you're hearing today, please subscribe below and don't forget to share it on as many platforms as you can and tell your friends to watch. Thank you.